Good evening, everybody. My name is Trevor Schramm, and I'm currently a senior at Boston College High School. And tonight, I'd like to speak with you about the St Louie Project and extending Jesuit community to the marginalized. Rather than just an organization as it may appear, the St Louie Project has been a process and a story. It has pervaded my life for nearly 2 years now, and I consider it to be at the forefront of my personal development. The St. Louie Project affects people in ways that I still struggle to wrap my head around, and I'm surprised every week in participating. However, the story of the St. Louie Project begins in April 2011 on a foreign exchange trip to Ireland. For 12 days, I stayed with the host family in Dublin through BC High and with our brother school, Belvedere College. Throughout the 12 days, our BC High group traveled extensively throughout the city and attended classes at the high school itself. One day, midweek, we were offered a proposition by one of Belvedere's faculty. We could either stay at the school for a couple hours and meander around, play some soccer, or we could lend a hand in a program they called the Soup Run. As a sophomore, still not fully engaged with the service aspect of a Jesuit education, I was naturally inclined to choose playing soccer for a couple hours. However, by divine intervention as I now see it, somehow I got stuck with participating in the Soup Run. I look back on this moment now as being remarkably noteworthy in ways that I had no way of comprehending at the time. The Soup Run was exactly what it sounded like. It was, at its base, a portable soup kitchen, delivering coffee, snacks, soup of course, and other essentials to the homeless living on the streets of Dublin. On this one afternoon, I not only bonded with the Irish students participating, but I left feeling struck. It seemed to me that such a simple program was being carried out weekly by our brother school, and although not initially, I remember reflecting on the excursion and thinking, why can't we be doing this at BC High? So, upon returning to the States and decompressing after my longest period away from home in my life, I processed what stuck with me and what faded away from the trip. And the one glaring note in my mind was the Soup Run. I suppose I was, in effect, inspired. Selling the idea to the faculty and eventually being put into contact with the campus ministry, the long, tedious, and anxious task of establishing our own Soup Run began. At first, I had a clear vision of what our program would be. Why not mirror exactly the program of our brother school? However, Belvedere and BC High, Dublin and Boston are very different. So, with 3 other committed student leaders having been recruited, we spent hours upon hours of goal setting, brainstorming logistics, and developing a mission. Finally, in January of last year, the St. Louie Project began. Forming the base of our program is St. Louis of Toulouse. St. Louis was a Hungarian prince imprisoned at a young age by a rival monarchy and educated by Franciscan friars. He was famous for going out into his villages and giving out bread, water, and aid to the derelict and downtrodden. He engaged the sick, while others shunned them. He conversed with the poor, while others would not give them such attention. Bearing in mind the work of St. Louis, each Thursday a group of about 10 of us juniors and seniors will gather in the cafeteria kitchen to prepare bag meals. The bags consist of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a piece of fruit, water, a napkin, and a snack item. We form basic assembly lines to expedite the process, which mainly serves as an uncomplicated introduction to the St. Louie Project for first-time participants. From the cafeteria, we head to the school chapel to discuss general safety measures and weekly protocol. As a last note before we head out into the city, we join hands and say prayer. We do this to reflect on why we choose to participate in the St. Louie Project, to recognize the fact that we are doing Christ's work, and to be mindful of the possibility and hope of seeing something that we wouldn't normally notice. Above all, we are mindful that primarily we provide a ministry of presence and an extension of our community at BC High to those who we meet and speak with on the streets. In forming the St. Louie Project, myself along with 3 other student leaders initially joined a Boston church in their homeless outreach organization, on which we intended to model our program. While at the church, we briefly prayed before we made our way for the Boston Common that evening. In prayer, I talked to God about internal conflicts and what exactly I should feel right or wrong about. I talked to God about whether or not certain actions of mine would have consequences, or what He would have me do differently. When we were ready, we joined the homeless outreach group in making preparations and set out for Boston Common. In this first fateful excursion, we met a man named Peter sitting alone by a doorstep on the street. Peter said things that I could relate to, such as the fact that he used to play the clarinet just as I used to. And in talking with him, not only did I see myself, but I saw God as well. Talking to Peter was God's way of answering my prayer, and I genuinely believe this. God was coming across in a personalized manner, a manner that's not often expressed by BC High or maybe other Jesuit institutions around the country. Through Peter, God guided me to act differently and to be aware of possible future consequences for actions. I remember seeing Peter once at the end of last year on a trip into the city. He was in rough shape, maybe the worst I've ever seen anyone on the St. Louie Project. He called an ambulance for himself to be readmitted to the hospital, alcohol-related, maybe more. I can't shake the image of Peter in that state. But I'll also never forget how thankful he was for our presence. It's something that we always come across on the St. Louie Project. It seems that time and time again, those who should be the most hopeless are the most hopeful. I'm not only drawn to the remarkably religious nature of the homeless with whom we speak, such as Peter, but also the pitfalls of their situation. Society has given up on the homeless. Passers-by on afternoons at the Boston Common notice depravity and poverty, but not the human at the core. Through no fault of their own, this mindset is ingrained. The St. Louie Project effectively works to correct these preconceived notions. So, what is to be taken from our endeavors? Extraordinary things are able to be perceived with an open heart and an open mind. Focus on relationships with those who could use a conversation. Strive to be inspired by experiences, and take something from each as you go along. Reform your imaginations. Next time you're walking through your city park, stop and notice those aching for your presence and community. It's not difficult. Trust me. Every school in this amazing network could be doing what we're doing at BC High. Ask yourselves, why not? But if not, take these concepts that I've talked about tonight, apply them to your own encounters. Be cognizant of the shunned, the lonely. We are committed to the Ignatian values stressed by our institutions. The St. Louie Project currently exists in 3 countries, with Colegio del Salvador in Buenos Aires, Argentina, being BC High's most recent brother school to adopt such a homeless outreach program. This should stand as a prime example for how we as a Jesuit network here are called to greater service and initiative, and how we aren't intimidated by the challenges of establishing our own school's individual programs. And so, in conclusion, I challenge you all to go forth and set the world on fire in your local communities in the way that the St. Louie Project does and will continue to do. Thank you. God bless.